My husband told me my parents were my problem, while his own family had been living on my paycheck for almost 6 years. I am Audra Vale, 46, a payroll systems analyst in Columbus, and I thought I was helping my marriage stay peaceful. Then I opened my bank records and found $183,280 in rent, insurance, loan payments, and family emergencies, all paid from my personal account. The worst part was not the money. It was discovering that Graham had let his family thank him for every dollar I sent. Chapter 1, The Rule. He said out loud the rosemary chicken smelled warm enough to make the whole condo feel kinder than it was. That was Beverly Vale's gift. She could make a table look like a family even when everyone sitting around it knew exactly where the invisible lines were. Linen napkins folded beside the plates. A little glass bowl of butter in the center. 2 cream candles burning low between the salt shaker and the cranberry dish. Even though it was only a Sunday dinner in March and not a holiday, Beverly sat across from me, with her pearls on, 72 years old and still able to make silence feel like a judgment. Russell sat at the head of the table, broad-shouldered even at 74, one hand wrapped around his water glass, like he was chairing a meeting instead of eating dinner. Kendra, Graham's younger sister, kept glancing at her phone between bites, one thumb moving over the screen while her 9-year-old daughter Tara watched a cartoon on an iPad in the living room. And beside me, my husband Graham Vale looked perfectly at home. He always did in that room. Graham was 48, a sales manager at Midwest Surgical Supply, and he had the kind of voice that made people believe he had already solved the problem before they even finished explaining it. I had married him in September of 2018, but the truth was I had started acting like part of his family months before that. April of 2018, to be exact. Back then we were engaged. I was still getting used to signing my future name on wedding forms, and Graham kept saying, "We're basically family already." That phrase had opened a door I did not realize would take almost 6 years to close. I was 46, a senior payroll systems analyst at Riverside Regional Medical Center, which meant my life was built around clean numbers, reliable dates, and systems that failed only when someone ignored the warnings. Graham and I had separate checking accounts and one joint account for the mortgage, utilities, groceries, and household bills. I always paid my part. I never missed a transfer. I never asked him to cover me. Money had never been messy because I did not allow it to be. At least, that was what I believed. My phone buzzed beside my plate just as Beverly started telling Graham about a neighbor who parked too close to the mailbox. I glanced down and saw my mother's name on the screen, Noreen Mercer. My mother almost never called during dinner. She was the kind of woman who apologized before asking whether you had a minute. She still lived in Dayton with my father Hal, in the same modest ranch house where I learned to ride a bike in the cracked driveway. She was 69, retired from the library, careful with money in a way that was not fear so much as dignity. My father was 71, a retired electrician who would rather climb a ladder with a bad knee than admit he needed help changing a porch light. I excused myself and stepped into Beverly's narrow hallway, where family photos lined the walls in silver frames. Graham at his college graduation. Graham holding a fish. Graham standing between Beverly and Russell, at what looked like every important moment the Vale family had ever decided to preserve. My mother's voice was soft when I answered, "Audra, honey, I am sorry to bother you." My stomach tightened. She told me Dad's stent procedure had gone well. Medicare had covered most of it, and the hospital staff had been kind. Then her voice got smaller. There was still a $6,740 out-of-pocket balance. A final notice had come in the mail. She said they could ask for a payment plan. She said she did not want me to worry. She said 3 times that if it was not convenient, I should forget she mentioned it. That was my mother. Even frightened, she tried to make herself easy to say no to. I told her I would call her back after dinner, and when I returned to the table, Graham looked up as if I had interrupted something more important than my father's heart. "Everything okay?" he asked. "Dad's procedure went well," I said, settling back into my chair. "But there's a medical balance. I'm going to help them this month." Graham put his fork down. It was such a small sound, silver touching china, but everyone heard it. He did not ask if Hal was all right. He did not ask whether Noreen was scared. He did not ask how much the bill was, or whether we should talk about it later. He just looked at me in front of his mother, his father, and his sister and said, "Your parents are your problem. Your money is yours. Mine is mine." The table went still. Beverly lowered her eyes to her plate, but not before I saw the faintest satisfaction pass across her face. Russell gave a small nod, the kind a man gives when he thinks someone has finally said what needed saying. Kendra did not even look up from her phone. No one said they were sorry about my father. No one asked whether my mother was holding herself together. No one seemed to notice that the woman sitting at their table had just been told. Her parents were outside the circle of family. Something inside me went quiet, not broken, not numb. quiet because for almost 6 years, every time Beverly and Russell needed rent support, every time Russell was short on a loan payment, every time Kendra needed help with car insurance after her divorce, Graham had used the same words. They're my parents, Audra. Family helps family. Kendra's trying to get back on her feet. Tara needs stability. Mom and Dad just need breathing room. Family when the money flowed toward the Vales. Your problem when my father had a hospital bill. I picked up my fork. My hand was steady. That surprised me more than anything. That's fair, I said. Graham's shoulders relaxed. Beverly reached for the cranberry dish. Russell cleared his throat and started talking about the neighbor again. Kendra asked whether there was more chicken. The room started moving around me as if the moment had passed. But it had not passed. It had landed. No one at that table understood what had just happened. They thought I had swallowed the insult because I was polite, because I hated conflict, because I had always been useful and quiet and dependable. They thought Graham had drawn the boundary and I had accepted it. They were right about one thing, I had accepted it. Exactly as he said it. On the drive home, Graham reached over and squeezed my hand like he was rewarding me for behaving. Dinner went well, he said. I looked out at the dark Columbus streets, at the wet shine of traffic lights on the pavement. It was informative, I said. He chuckled a little, as if I had made a dry joke. He did not understand me. That was becoming the theme of our marriage. That night, Graham fell asleep within minutes. He always slept easily after hurting me, as if saying something cruel drained him of nothing. I lay beside him and stared at the ceiling fan turning slowly in the dark. I remembered the first rent transfer to Beverly and Russell, back when Graham said it would only be temporary. I remembered paying Kendra's car insurance because she needed to get to her job at the dental office, and Tara needed someone stable. I remembered the winter utility bill Beverly called ridiculous. I remembered Russell's truck payment. I remembered Destin, Florida in 2021, when I paid most of the rental house deposit and part of the flights, then found out I was not invited because Graham said it was immediate Vale family only. I had been hurt then. I had almost said something then. But Graham had told me not to make money emotional. I understand now that was never advice, it was strategy. He had used the best part of me, the part my parents raised carefully, the part that believed love meant showing up before someone had to beg. He had used it to build himself into a generous son, a loyal brother, the man who handled things. And I had let him, because I thought that was what marriage was. I thought I was helping us. I was not thinking about revenge at first. I was thinking about my mother apologizing for a hospital bill. I was thinking about my father, who would rather sit in pain than make himself a burden. I was thinking about Graham's voice at Beverly's table, clean and certain, cutting my parents out of the word family, while his own family ate food in a condo my money had helped protect. At 1:12 in the morning, I got out of bed. Graham did not stir. I went downstairs to my home office, the small room with the printer, the filing cabinet, and the desk where I had balanced more payroll reports than I could count. I opened my laptop and signed into my personal checking account. Not the joint account. Not our household account. Mine. The bank portal loaded slowly, blue light washing over my hands. I selected custom date range, April 2018 to March 2024. Then I opened a new spreadsheet and typed the first line, Vale family transfers, April 2018 to March 2024. The cursor blinked at the end of the sentence. I did not know the total yet. I did not know how many times I had mistaken obligation for love, or silence for peace. But I knew one thing with a clarity that settled deep in my chest. For once, I was going to look at my marriage in a language Graham could not soften, twist, or talk his way around. Numbers, chap 2 the spreadsheet. Didn't I started with the first transfer I could find, April 27, 2018. $1,350. Memo line, Vale family support. I stared at it for a long time because it did not look dangerous, it looked ordinary. A clean bank entry, a date, an amount, a destination. There was no sound attached to it, no candlelight, no humiliation. No Graham placing his fork down at his mother's table and deciding my parents were outside the word family. But I remembered that payment. Beverly and Russell were still in Toledo then. Still talking about selling the little house they could no longer keep up with. Graham had stood in our kitchen, one hand on the counter, voice soft and reasonable. They just need breathing room, Audra. A month or 2, maybe 3. We're basically family already. I had believed him, so I typed rent support into the spreadsheet and copied the amount. Then I found the next month, and the month after that, $1,350 again, then again, then again. Temporary had a strange way of turning permanent when nobody was brave enough to call it by its real name. By the time I finished the rent column, my coffee had gone cold beside the laptop. The next line was Kendra, $318 a month to Buckeye Mutual Auto Insurance. The first payment came after her divorce, when her voice shook over speakerphone and Graham looked at me with that practiced sadness of his. She can't let the policy lapse, he had said. If she loses the car, she loses the dental office job. And Tara needs stability right now. I remembered Tara at 7 years old, asleep on our couch with one shoe still on, while Kendra cried in the bathroom because custody exchanges were getting ugly. That was the version of the story Graham gave me. A scared sister, a little girl, one bad month. I had paid it because I could. No one ever asked if I still should. I typed car insurance, Kendra. Then I copied payment after payment into the sheet until the numbers lined up like tiny accusations. After that came utilities. Not always the same amount. 200 here, 400 there. Winter overages when Russell refused to lower the heat. Summer overages when Beverly said the condo stayed too stuffy unless the air ran all day. Every call had sounded temporary. Every request had worn a costume. Just this month, we'll catch up next cycle. Your father-in-law is embarrassed to even ask. Only Russell had never sounded embarrassed. Beverly had never sounded unsure. Graham had sounded patient, as if I was the one making things difficult by needing an explanation. Then I found the roof repair. $4,850, paid in July of 2020, to a contractor in Toledo. That was before Beverly and Russell sold the old house and moved into the rental condo near Columbus. The roof had started leaking over the back bedroom, and Graham told me the sale would fall apart if they did not repair it quickly. I remembered Beverly at church a few weeks later, speaking to Marcy Bell from her book club while I stood close enough to hear. Graham really stepped up for us that year, she had said, glowing with pride. That boy takes care of his family. I had smiled then. I had actually smiled. I typed Toledo roof repair, 2020. My fingers slowed over the keys. The Destin trip was worse. The charge was not one neat transfer. It was scattered across a rental deposit, flight adjustments, grocery delivery, and a credit card payment Graham said he would reimburse from his bonus. He never did. I had paid most of the beach house deposit and part of the flights in 2021, then found out 2 weeks later that I was not invited. It's just immediate Vale families this time, Graham had told me. I had stood in our bedroom holding a laundry basket, looking at him like he had switched languages. But I paid the deposit. He had sighed, not angry, just disappointed in me for noticing. Don't make money emotional, Audra. That line had worked on me for years. I typed Destin, Florida trip. Not invited for the first time that night. My eyes burned, not because of the money. Money was at least honest. Money left a trail. It did not pretend to love you while making you smaller. I found the North Star Credit Union payments next. Smaller, irregular amounts tied to Russell's truck loan. A landscaping idea that never became a business. Missed payments, Graham said, would hurt his father's pride if anyone found out. Victor Lyle, loan officer, appeared in 2 email forwards Graham had sent me with the subject line. Can you take care of this today? Can you take care of this? That had been my role. Not wife. Not daughter-in-law. Not family. A system. By 3:40 in the morning, I had the first total direct payments. $163,420. I checked it twice, then a third time, because the number seemed too large to belong to my quiet life. Then I added the irregular expenses. The roof. Destin. Dental bills. Holiday gifts. Emergency transfers, $19,860, total $183,280. I sat back in my chair. When the recurring transfers and the irregular payments were placed together, it came to roughly $2,500 a month over nearly 6 years. $2,500 a month to maintain a family that had watched Graham tell me, my parents were my problem and had not flinched. I was not shocked that I had helped. I was shocked that my help had become invisible. Every dollar had a date. Every date had a story. Every story had been softened by Graham until it no longer sounded like a choice. He had never shoved me toward those payments. That would have been easier to recognize. He had praised me into them. He had called me generous. He had called me the only one who understood what family meant. He had made refusal feel like cruelty. And I had been raised by Noreen and Hal Mercer, 2 people who believed you helped if you could, and you did not keep score with people you loved. Graham had found that part of me and built a door through it. Near dawn, I closed the spreadsheet. But I did not shut the laptop. Something still felt unfinished. I went to the file drawer beside Graham's side of the office. Not to snoop through his life, I told myself. Then I almost laughed, because what was left of privacy after a man let his wife fund his family and took the applause for it. The first statement was from a credit card I knew he carried but had never asked about. Balance, a little over $22,000. There were steakhouse charges, golf fees, cigar dinners, and hotel bars from sales trips. Caleb Ross appeared in a few forwarded receipts, usually with some joke about networking being expensive. Then there was the SUV lease, $690 a month. Graham had once told me he needed that car because clients trusted a man who looked successful. I had not asked why his parents needed my rent support if their successful son could afford heated leather seats. Another folder showed a crypto loss. $7,500. He had called it an investment experiment at the time, said it was no big deal, said everyone in sales had taken a swing at crypto that year. Graham was not broke. That was the part that settled deepest. He was not helpless. He was not carrying some noble burden in silence. He had money for the image of success, for dinners, for leather seats, for bad investments, for the version of himself he wanted other people to admire. He used my money because my money let him keep his life untouched. At 7:16, I sent an email to Paige Lawson, my CPA and financial planner. Paige, I need to review recurring transfers from my personal checking and make immediate changes. I can bring statements, earliest appointment available please, she answered at 8:03. 10 o'clock, bring everything. Paige Lawson was 52, practical. Silver glasses, no-nonsense voice, and the kind of office where even the plants looked organized. When I sat across from her that morning, I slid the folder across the desk. She read in silence for several minutes, then she looked up. Audra, do you want me to review this as a cash flow issue, a tax issue, or a personal safety issue? The question was so precise I almost cried. Cash flow today, I said. Personal safety soon. She nodded once, no judgment, no gossip, no dramatic widening of the eyes. That was what I needed. Someone who understood that numbers did not become less serious because they were attached to family. I told her what I wanted. I want every recurring transfer to Beverly and Russell stopped. The rent support, the utility buffer, anything connected to North Star. I want the Buckeye Mutual payment for Kendra stopped too. I want confirmation in writing. I want the memo lines preserved. I want the records printed by category. Paige typed as I spoke. And after that, she asked. I want a separate support account opened for my parents, Noreen and Hal Mercer. If I help them, I want it clean, direct, and mine. Paige looked at me over her glasses. You understand the first missed payments may trigger calls, Oz. I understand. And you are sure? I thought of Graham at the table, his voice calm enough to cut glass. Graham told me my money was mine, I said. I'm just believing him. Paige did not smile, but something in her expression softened. Then let's make sure the paperwork agrees. By noon, the recurring transfers were canceled. The confirmations came to my email one by one. Rent support stopped. Utility buffers stopped. Buckeye Mutual stopped. North Star loan support stopped. The first rent payment would not go out on April 1st. That night, I made dinner like usual. Graham came home late, dropped his keys in the bowl by the door, and complained about a difficult hospital buyer in Cincinnati. I listened. I asked whether he wanted salad. I nodded when he told me Caleb thought the client would come around by Friday. He did not know there was a 6-year folder on my laptop. He did not know there was a spreadsheet with his family's name on it. He did not know that inside the banking system he had taken for granted. A silence was forming. After dinner, I stood by the kitchen calendar and counted the days. 19. For almost 6 years, my money had kept the Vale family comfortable. Now for the first time, its absence would speak louder than I ever had. Chapter 3. When the money stopped, April 1st came in gray and wet, with rain tapping against the kitchen window, while I poured coffee into my favorite blue mug. I had expected the first call to come later in the day. Maybe after Beverly checked her bank account twice. Maybe after Russell looked at the rent reminder and convinced himself there had been a mistake. But at 8:17 in the morning, my phone lit up on the counter, Beverly Vale. I let it ring twice before I answered. Good morning, Beverly. She did not say good morning back. Audra, the rent transfer didn't come through. No hello, no how are you. No mention of my father, whose heart had been opened and repaired less than 2 weeks earlier. Just the missing money standing in the room before any of us did. I looked out the window at the rain. I know, I said. I stopped it. There was a pause long enough for me to hear the faint clink of dishes on her end. Beverly had probably called from her little breakfast table, the one by the sliding glass door at the condo. You stopped it? Yes. Tom Haskins sent a reminder this morning. He said if it isn't corrected in a few days, it becomes a formal late notice. Tom Haskins managed the condo property where Beverly and Russell lived. He was polite, efficient, and as far as I knew, entirely uninterested in family drama. He just wanted rent paid on time. Beverly lowered her voice. Audra, Russell's pension doesn't stretch that far, you know that. We depend on that money. I took a slow sip of coffee. Graham was clear. My money is mine. That is not how family behaves. The word family landed differently now. It no longer warmed anything. It only showed me where the knife had been kept. Did anyone in your family ask how my father was after his heart procedure? Silence, not confusion, not grief. Just silence. I waited one breath, then another. I hope you and Russell can work something out with Tom, I said. Audra, don't be cruel. I'm not being cruel, Beverly. I'm being consistent. I ended the call before she could turn my boundary into a trial. For the rest of the morning, my phone stayed face down on my desk while I worked from home. Payroll reports, department corrections, missing timesheets, all the little errors other people needed me to fix. That had always been the shape of my life. See the gap, close the gap. See the mistake, correct the mistake. Keep the system running so no one else had to feel the consequences. But by lunch, Graham had texted twice. Mom says something is wrong with their rent. Then, 20 minutes later, call me. I did not. He came home at 6:43, earlier than usual, still wearing his Midwest surgical supply badge, clipped to his belt. He dropped his keys into the bowl by the door hard enough to make the metal ring. What did you do? I was at the stove, stirring soup I had barely tasted. I made dinner. You know what I'm talking about. I turned the heat down. Your mother called? She said you canceled their rent. I didn't cancel their rent, I canceled my transfer. His jaw tightened. Don't play word games with me, Audra. I'm not. Words matter. That's what you taught me at dinner. He took a step closer. Lowering his voice like that would make him sound reasonable. You're punishing my parents over one comment. If it was just one comment, why did everyone at the table agree with it? That's different. I set the spoon down and looked at him. Different how? He opened his mouth, then closed it. That was the first time I saw it. Not guilt, not yet, but the beginning of calculation. Graham was used to talking people past the part where they noticed the contradiction. He was not used to someone standing directly in front of it and refusing to move. Before he could find another angle, his phone rang. He looked down and cursed softly. Kendra. He answered on speaker by mistake, or maybe because he wanted me to hear how serious this was. Graham, what is going on? Kendra's voice came through sharp and panicked. Buckeye Mutual just sent me a cancellation warning. I folded my arms. What warning? Graham asked, though his eyes flicked toward me. My car insurance. Erica Sloan emailed me. If the 318 isn't paid in 10 days, my policy lapses. I can't drive without insurance, Graham. I have work. I have Tara's custody exchange next Friday. I'll handle it, he said, those 3 words again. I could almost see the old machine trying to start. Graham promised. Graham handled. Audra paid. Kendra's voice cracked. This isn't fair, Audra. She had not said my name until that moment. I stepped closer to the phone. What wasn't fair was you thanking Graham for money that never came from him. The line went dead quiet. Graham stared at me. Kendra spoke again, softer. What does that mean? It means I should ask your brother. Graham ended the call. You had no right to say that. I had every right. My name was on the money. He rubbed both hands over his face, then walked into the living room like distance would rearrange the truth. A minute later, I heard his phone again. Dad, calm down, he said. What did Victor say? I stood in the kitchen doorway. Russell had gotten a call from Victor Lyle at North Star Credit Union. The truck loan did not have the usual buffer payment. There was a missed amount, and if it was not corrected, a late fee would hit. Graham paced in front of the fireplace, voice low and urgent. Dad, I'll handle it. Just don't call Mom yet. I almost laughed, but there was nothing funny in it. He still thought handle it meant find a way back to my account. That night, after Graham went upstairs without eating, I printed the first set of records, bank statements, transfer confirmations, memo lines, Vale family support, month after month, rent support records, Buckeye Mutual payments, North Star loan support, Destin receipts. The Toledo roof repair invoice from 2020. The email confirmation from Paige showing every recurring transfer had been stopped. The printer worked steadily in the dark office, page after page sliding into the tray. It sounded like a machine counting backward from the life I used to have. 2 days later, Beverly went to church book club and tried to pretend nothing had changed. I knew because Marcy Bell called me by accident while trying to reach Beverly, then laughed and said she must have tapped the wrong contact. But before she hung up, she mentioned Beverly seemed a little shaken. She said there was a banking mix-up, Marcy said lightly. I told her I remembered when Graham helped with that roof back in Toledo. Such a good son. I held the phone a little tighter. Yes, I said. People remember that story. After we hung up, I sat very still. Beverly's image had always mattered to her. Graham's image mattered even more. And now the story she had told other women over coffee and church cookies had begun to tremble under its own weight. My brother Evan called that evening from Dayton. He rarely called unless something was wrong, or he had already tried fixing it himself. Mom's worried, he said. It's not just about Dad, about you. I leaned against the kitchen counter. She shouldn't be. Too late, she's a mother. I told him only the clean version, Graham's comment, the payments, the rent, the calls. Even was quiet for a while, then he said, You don't have to keep buying peace from people who never gave you any. I closed my eyes. That sentence did what sympathy could not. It gave me permission without making me feel pitied. The next morning I sat across from Ruth Benning, a family attorney whose office overlooked a parking lot full of wet spring trees. Ruth was in her late 50s, with short dark hair threaded with gray, and a voice that never hurried. I had brought the folder, but she did not react dramatically when she saw the total. $183,280 is significant, she said. But I want to be very clear. If these payments were made voluntarily, Without a loan agreement, recovering the full amount would be difficult. I figured, that doesn't mean you're powerless. She explained separate accounts, marital finances, written consent, postnuptial agreements, personal debt disclosure. What could be protected going forward and what could not be easily undone. If you stay married, she said, you need financial boundaries in writing. If he continues to conceal or misrepresent money, you need to be prepared for separation. The word sat between us like a closed door I had not yet decided to open. Ruth folded her hands on the desk. Forgiveness is emotional, protection is legal. Don't confuse the two. I wrote that down. On Friday afternoon, Graham texted me. We're having everyone over Saturday, my parents and Kendra. We need to talk this through like adults. I looked at the folder on my desk, thick now, organized by category. Then I looked at Ruth Benning's card tucked beneath the paperclip. Graham thought he had called a meeting. He thought he was bringing his family over to pressure me back into being reasonable, which meant quiet, useful, and available. I typed back one sentence. Saturday is fine. Then I set the phone down beside the folder. He had invited his family. He had no idea I had already invited the truth. Chapter 4. Everyone thanked the wrong person. Saturday arrived with a bright, clean sky that made everything feel more exposed. I spent the morning making the house look ordinary. I wiped down the kitchen counters, straightened the pillows on the living room couch, and set a pitcher of water on the coffee table with 6 glasses. I did not make coffee. I did not bake anything. I was done softening rooms for people who had no intention of being gentle with me. Graham watched me from the doorway while I placed the folder on the side table. You don't have to turn this into a court case, he said. I looked at the folder, then at him. I didn't. You turned it into a family meeting. His mouth tightened, but the doorbell rang before he could answer. Beverly came in first, holding her purse against her chest like a shield. Her lipstick was perfect, but her eyes were tired in a way powder could not hide. Russell followed behind her and went straight to the fireplace, where he crossed his arms and stared at me like I was a contractor who had failed an inspection. Kendra came last, her hair pulled into a loose ponytail, her phone gripped in one hand. She looked exhausted. Tara's with a friend, she said before anyone asked, because I didn't know how long this was going to take. Graham stood near the hallway, not beside me and not beside them. That was his preferred position, close enough to both sides to claim whichever one looked safer. Beverly started before anyone sat down. You knew we depended on that money. Her voice shook, but not with sadness. With accusation, Russell added, family doesn't just cut people off with no warning. Kendra looked at me. If my insurance lapses, I can't drive to work. I can't pick up Tara. Do you understand what that does to my custody schedule? Graham raised both hands. Audra, maybe not everything all at once. We can compromise. No. The word landed cleanly. Graham blinked. Beverly's mouth opened a little. Kendra looked down at her phone, then back up at me. I stayed standing. Before we discuss money, I want to ask something. Did anyone here ask how my father was after his heart procedure? No one answered. Did anyone text my mother? Silence. When Graham said my parents were my problem, did anyone in that dining room think that was wrong? Beverly shifted in her chair. This isn't about your parents. This is about what you did to this family. That's exactly what this is about, I said. Which family counts when my money is involved? I picked up the folder and placed it on the coffee table. Not hard, not dramatically. Just flat, steady, unavoidable. Beverly stared at it. What is that? The part of the conversation Graham hoped we wouldn't have. I opened the first tab. Rent support. $1,350 a month, beginning April 2018, when you and Russell were preparing to sell the Toledo house and move closer to Columbus. It was supposed to be temporary. Russell's jaw moved, but he said nothing. I turned the page. Car insurance for Kendra. $318 a month to Buckeye Mutual Auto Insurance after the divorce, so you could keep driving to the dental office and keep Tara's custody exchanges stable. Kendra's eyes flicked to Graham. I turned another page. Utility overages, winter heating, summer air conditioning. All the months Beverly called them just this month. Beverly's cheeks colored. That was between Graham and us. No, I said. It was between your bills and my checking account. I moved to the next tab, Toledo roof repair. $4,850 in July 2020, before you sold the house. Not the condo, the house you still owned then. Beverly, you told Marcy Bell at church that Graham stepped up for you that year. Beverly looked away. I turned another page. Destin, Florida, 2021. Rental house deposit, flight adjustments, groceries. I paid a large part of a trip I was not invited to because Graham said it was immediate Vale family only. For the first time, Russell looked uncomfortable. I kept going. North Star Credit Union. Truck loan support. Several missed payments covered so Russell would not get hit with late fees. Victor Lyle's name is on the email chain. Then the last section. Holiday gifts. Dental bills. Emergency transfers. Small things that became invisible because nobody had to ask where the money came from. Asked. Kendra whispered, "How much?" I took the summary sheet from the back of the folder and laid it on top. Direct payments, $163,420. Irregular expenses, $19,860. Total, $183,280. The room changed. It was not a gasp. It was worse. It was the sound of every person trying to rearrange 6 years of memory at the same time. Kendra sat down slowly. "I didn't know it was that much. None of you did," I said. "Because none of you asked." Russell cleared his throat. "We thought you and Graham were helping together." Beverly found her voice. "Graham said it came from the household." I looked at my husband. "Then Graham can explain what he told you." Graham's face had lost its color. "I may have simplified things?" "No," I said. "You don't get to hide inside that word." He looked at me once, a warning in his eyes. I ignored it. "Graham, tell them whose name was on every transfer." Beverly turned toward him. Russell stared. Kendra lowered her phone to her lap. Graham swallowed. "I told them it was coming from us." "From us how?" I asked. He looked at the floor. "From our household." "And what did you let them believe?" His voice dropped. "That it was joint money." Beverly made a small sound, almost like she had been touched by something hot. I picked up the rent statement and held it out. There was no joint account behind any of this. Not one. Every rent transfer, every insurance payment, every utility buffer, every emergency check came from my personal checking account, the account I had before I married Graham. He did not contribute $1 to these payments. Russell looked at Graham, not angry yet, just stunned. "So every time I thanked you, you just let me?" Graham did not answer. Kendra's voice was small. "Was it always Audra?" Graham stayed silent. I slid the Buckeye Mutual records toward her. Kendra read the first page and pressed her lips together. Graham suddenly stepped toward me. "Kitchen. Now." I almost laughed at the command, but I followed him because I wanted everyone to hear what came after. He turned on me the second we crossed the doorway. "You're making me look like a liar." I kept my voice low. "You are a liar, Graham. I'm just the reason they can see it now." His eyes flashed. "I was trying to protect my parents." "No. You were trying to protect the version of yourself they admired. That's not fair. Hall has a $6,740 medical balance, and you called him my problem. Meanwhile, you have a $690 SUV lease, steakhouse charges with Caleb Ross, $22,000 in credit card debt, and a $7,500 crypto loss you called an experiment." He looked toward the living room, panic crossing his face. "Keep your voice down." "Why?" asked. "They should know what your money was doing while mine was taking care of them." He dragged a hand through his hair. "I just wanted them to be proud of me." That was the first honest thing he had said all day. I looked at him, and for a second I almost felt sorry for the boy inside the man, still begging Beverly and Russell to see him as successful. Then I remembered Destin. I remembered my mother apologizing for needing help. I remembered his fork hitting Beverly's china. "You bought their pride with my paycheck." He had no answer. When we returned to the living room, Beverly was crying quietly, but I could not tell whether she was hurt by Graham's lie or by the loss of the son she thought she had. Russell had sat down. Kendra still held the insurance statement in both hands. I stood beside the coffee table. "If anyone wants to discuss these numbers further, we will do it with Paige Lawson present. She is my CPA and financial planner. She will confirm records, not mediate family feelings." Graham looked at me sharply. "And you," I said, turning to him, "will correct what you allowed them to believe in writing." Beverly started. "But family." Russell lifted one hand and for once she stopped. Kendra did not say unfair again. Graham stood in the center of the room without the story that had held him up for years. He was not the generous son. He was not the man who handled things. He was a man who had stood on his wife's money and accepted applause. I closed the folder. "No more money moves in this family unless the truth moves first." No one answered. And for the first time in that living room, the silence did not belong to me. Chapter 5, The Tomes of the Truth. By the time we sat in Paige Lawson's conference room 2 weeks later, the truth had already changed shape. It was no longer a feeling in my chest or a folder on my coffee table. It was a stack of records arranged in neat rows under fluorescent lights, with my name on every account, and Graham's silence sitting beside me like a second person. Paige's office was small but polished, with glass walls, gray chairs, and a long table that made everyone sit facing one another. Graham sat to my left, his shoulders stiff. Beverly and Russell sat across from me. Kendra sat beside them, turning her phone over and over in her hands. My parents sat at the far end of the table, quiet enough to make the room feel ashamed. My father, Hal, still looked tired from the stent procedure, but he had worn a clean blue button-down shirt and combed his silver hair, as if this were a meeting he wanted to respect. My mother? Noreen kept her purse on her lap with both hands around it. "We don't want to make trouble," she said for the third time. I reached over and touched her wrist. "You didn't." That was the difference nobody in Graham's family seemed to understand. The Vales had come to find out where their money went. My parents had come afraid that needing help had cost me peace. Paige stood at the head of the table with a folder of her own. I want to be clear before we begin, she said. I am not here to mediate a family conflict. I do not represent Beverly, Russell, Kendra, or Graham. I am here only to confirm records, account ownership, and recurring transfers at Audra's request. Beverly's mouth tightened, but she said nothing. Paige turned the first page. The reviewed amount is $183,280, she said. That covers rent support, car insurance, utilities, North Star Credit Union support, the Toledo roof repair, Destin expenses, and several emergency transfers. She did not list every payment the way I had in my living room. She did not need to. Everyone at that table already knew what the folder contained now. Paige's job was not to make them feel it. Her job was to make it impossible to deny. All reviewed payments came from Audra Vale's personal checking account, Paige continued. Not from the joint household account. Russell looked down at the table. Beverly's voice came out thin. I didn't know. I looked at her carefully. For the first time, I did not want to wound her. I only wanted her to stop using ignorance like a blanket. Not knowing helped you, I said. That doesn't make it harmless. Her eyes filled, but she did not argue. Russell cleared his throat. So what are we supposed to do about rent now? Paige looked at him, professional and calm. You'll need to speak with Tom Haskins about a payment plan or evaluate housing that fits your current pension income. I can't advise you financially because you are not my client. It was the first time I had seen Russell hear the word pension as a boundary instead of an excuse. Kendra sat forward. And my insurance? If that policy lapses, I can't drive Tara. I can't get to the dental office. I care about Tara, I said. That's why I helped the first time. But caring about a child doesn't mean I become a silent bank account for her adults. Kendra looked down, and this time she did not call me unfair. My father spoke then, and his voice was rough but steady. Graham, I never wanted my daughter choosing between families. Graham stared at the table. Noreen added softly. I only called because the hospital sent a final notice. I would have asked for a payment plan if Audra couldn't help. I never wanted this. That was the moment Graham finally looked small to me. Not sorry, not fully, but smaller. Because my parents had asked for less in a crisis than his family had expected as a routine. After Paige's meeting, Graham and I drove to Ruth Benning's office in silence. Ruth did not pretend the past could be neatly repaired. Recovering the full $183,280 would be difficult, she said. Many of those payments appear voluntary. But protection going forward is not optional if this marriage continues. She laid out the terms in clean language. My separate account stayed separate. The joint account would be used only for shared household expenses. Any family support over $500 from joint funds would require written consent from both of us. Graham would not promise, imply, or offer access to my money to anyone. He would disclose his personal debt, including the $22,000 in credit card balance, the $690 SUV lease, and the $7,500 crypto loss. If he wanted to help Beverly, Russell, or Kendra, he would use his own money. Then Ruth looked at him. And you will begin a symbolic repayment of $750 a month, either to Audra's separate account or to a medical support fund for her parents, depending on what Audra chooses. Graham shifted in his chair. That doesn't erase anything, Ruth said. It proves you understand money has to move differently now. I chose the medical support fund, not because Graham deserved to feel noble, because my father's bill was real. And for once, Graham's money would go toward a family he had dismissed. We also agreed to marriage counseling with Dr. Simone Avery. At our first session, Graham sat with his hands locked together and said the sentence men say when they want forgiveness without naming the wound. I'm sorry this got out of hand. Dr. Avery did not even blink. Are you sorry it hurt Audra or sorry it became visible? The room went very still. I looked at Graham. I don't need an apology that makes you feel less guilty. I need you to say what you did. It took him a long time. Finally, he said. I let my family believe Audra wasn't the one helping them. I took credit for money that wasn't mine. I called her parents her problem while mine were living on her paycheck. His voice cracked on the last word. I did not comfort him. That night, I made him write the email. I did not draft it. I did not soften it. I sat at the kitchen table while he typed, deleted, typed again, and finally sent it to Beverly, Russell, and Kendra with me copied. He wrote that from April 2018 through March 2024, I had paid the support. He wrote that there had been no joint account behind it. He wrote that he had allowed them to thank the wrong person. He wrote that he had no right to imply my money was available to them. He wrote that from then on, any help for the Vale family would come from his own income and his real budget. He ended with, I am sorry I took credit for something that belonged to Audra. That sentence did not heal me. but it made the lie stand up in public where everyone could see it. The consequences came quietly after that. Beverly stopped talking about Graham as the good son at church. Marcy Bell asked her once, gently, if Audra had been the one helping all those years, and Beverly's face folded in a way pride does when it has nowhere left to hide. Russell called Victor Lyle at North Star Credit Union and set up a payment plan himself. He and Beverly also met with Tom Haskins and started looking at a smaller apartment that fit their actual pension, not my hidden subsidies. Kendra picked up extra hours at the dental office and paid the overdue Buckeye Mutual premium herself before the policy could be fully canceled. It did not fix everything, but it meant she kept her car insured, kept her shifts, and kept Tara's custody exchanges from turning into another crisis. That evening, she texted me, "I paid it. I should have done that a long time ago." I read the message twice. I did not answer right away, but I saved it. Graham canceled 2 golf dinners with Caleb Ross and started talking about downgrading the SUV. I paid my father's $6,740 medical balance first from my own account, because Hal's bill was real, and I was done letting my parents wait while Graham learned accountability. A few days later, Graham made his first $750 payment into the medical support fund. It did not erase what he had done. It did not turn him back into a good husband. It simply meant his money finally had to move toward the family he had dismissed. There is a difference between being forgiven and being accountable. I hired a handyman to fix the front porch step in Dayton that my parents had been stepping around for 2 years. Then I booked them a quiet weekend cabin near Hocking Hills. Nothing extravagant. Just a small place where Dad could sit by the water and Mom could drink coffee without opening another bill. A week later, I sat at their kitchen table eating pot roast, green beans, and mashed potatoes from plates I had known since childhood. No one asked how much anything cost. No one made me feel like generosity was rent I had to pay to belong. Dad told the story of teaching me to drive, how I had knocked over an orange cone and apologized to it. Mom laughed so hard she had to wipe her eyes. My phone buzzed beside my plate. Graham asked, "Can we talk when you get home?" I looked at the message for a long moment. I did not hate him in that second, but I was no longer in a hurry to save him from the consequences of being seen clearly. I turned the phone face down and listened to my father finish his story. Graham once told me my money was mine. What he did not understand was that once I truly believed him, I also began to remember that my life was mine too. Would you forgive Graham after 6 years of financial betrayal, or would you walk away for good? And should he have to repay the $183,280, even if Audra paid it willingly?